Hey, good morning, Foundry Church. We're doing well? Yeah, as Greg said, my name is Matthew, and I got the privilege of growing up here in the youth group. And I'm going into my last semester at Central Christian College of the Bible, which is absolutely wild because I feel like I just graduated high school. Time is moving super fast. I know my parents feel that more than I do. And it's just fun to have, to be back in town and kind of reminiscing about my childhood, talking to friends and family here. And I want to share with you one of the scariest moments of my childhood. Little 8-year-old Matthew, back in, Kansas City, Missouri, my parents, when we were living there. And I'm sitting in the living room after dinner, and I almost died to an ice cube. Yeah, ice cube almost takes me out. And yeah, we were sitting there, just finished dinner, and I had a little bit of juice, and I just finished that juice. I was like, well, I'll start, playing with these ice cubes, start chewing on them, sucking on them, and one of them gets stuck in the back of my throat, and I start choking for air, and my mom is sitting right next to me. Next to her on the couch is my sister Heidi. Sitting in front of me is my little brother Cameron and my little sister Addie, and then over across the living room is my dad in his recliner. That was Dad's chair. We were watching the idiot test. Well, the real idiot being tested that night was me. So I'm sitting there choking for a minute, and nobody's looking at me because they're all watching the show. And my mom looks at me like, what are you doing? We're trying to watch a show. I'm not being very obvious. I'm like, ugh. So I run over to my dad after feeling like I'm just like suffering and nobody's looking at me, nobody's even paying attention. And he, at this point, has just finished his paramedic training. And so he gives me a few good back blows, and the ice cube goes flying and hits my brother in the back of his head. Wait, no, that didn't happen. I wish it would have hit him in the head, but but really, it felt like one of the scariest moments of my life. I feel like I was suffering, and there were people there, but I felt like I was alone because nobody was really helping me at first. And yeah, I think I kind of felt that in Poland too, and Greg left me. But and he said, we're friends, we love each other. No, I love him. He's been a really good inspiration to me. But that feeling of suffering while there are people around, but yet you feel alone is, I feel like, an all too real feeling. Sadly, this is a broken world, and we experience a lot of hardship in life, whether as a result of our own sin and choices or other people's choices pushed on us, or just a result of, this natural world and decaying. We get health issues, financial issues, relationships get hurt. It's all too real. And in many cases, there aren't people that often like to help us in some of those. Whether that's because they don't know how, or they feel uncomfortable, or we're not being very open about it, we're keeping it to ourselves. What I want us to recognize is that we can reach out to the healer. There is someone that we can reach out to. One of the most extreme cases of this that I have seen is from Mark chapter 5. This is going to be the story of the bleeding woman. She has really been suffering alone. So what I want us to take note of is, again, in our times of need and desperation, reach out to the healer. So as we dive into these two parts of these verses of what it looks like and what it means, what she's gone through, it is our tradition here at Foundry to stand in honor of God's word. If you're able, if you all would stand with me as I read this passage. Starting in verse 24. And he went with him, being Jesus, and a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. Go and have a seat. So here we see Jesus traveling across the Sea of Galilee to a town. The text doesn't tell us specifically what town, but through the commentaries I've read and the professors I've talked to, we can likely infer that this is either Capernaum or Magdala. But where Jesus is traveling from is a place called the Gerasenes, where he just healed a demon-possessed man, Legion, if you're familiar with him. And Legion is going to draw in some important context as well later on. So as he gets to this town, there's a huge crowd waiting for him. Pretty big crowd, and he can barely breathe. The text says that they thronged about him, like you can barely move. And where him and his disciples are going is to a man named Jairus' house, because Jairus' 12-year-old daughter is very sick and basically on her deathbed. She's about to die. And by the time he gets there, she is dead, and he raises her to life. But in the process of going there, a woman touches Jesus' garments. And, it's just the clothes he's wearing. And this woman who had been suffering, we see that she spent all of her money on doctors, and no one could help her. So she's most likely broke. Hasn't found any relief, but yet she sees him. She sees Jesus. And after 12 years of no good news, she's like, well, he can help me. If I even just touch his clothes, I can be healed. I want that kind of faith. I strive to get there. I'll be honest. Being in the presence of Jesus, that is not always my first response when I'm going through something. Sometimes I'm mad at God and I'm just like, I just need to sit in this. Or I've been going through something for a while. I'm just like, there's no help for this. This is a set and done case. This woman's been suffering for 12 years. That's the response I would have had. No one's helped me. No one's been able to help me. I spent all my money. Nothing's going to help. But she sees this guy, Jesus, and she's like, he can help me. That's the response I want. So a little bit more context. I got to travel internationally to Poland. I also got to travel with my school with Central to Israel. We went on a trip to Israel. And as a part of that, we went to this chapel in Magdala called the Duke in Altum. There it is right there. And the Duke in Altum also means to send into the deep. It's a term for discipleship. And it's also known as the women's atrium or the women's chapel. And you'll see why as we move into the lobby. There are 8 pillars in the lobby. And 7 of these pillars are inscribed with a name of the women in Jesus' ministry. The 8th pillar is left blank because that is meant to signify all of the women in ministry, all of the women of faith. I want to draw our attention to the basement. As you head downstairs into this chapel, you'll see a room and you'll see a painting by a man named Daniel Cariola. The floor you see here is actually the 1st century floor of the original Magdalene marketplace. And one of my professors, Walt Harper, who was on that trip, he's also an archaeologist. He just went crazy about this. But I want to draw our attention to the painting. So this painting, you'll notice there's a lot of feet and a hand reaching to some clothes. Well, that's because Daniel Cariola wanted to paint a picture of this woman's perspective, of how she lived in the world, of how she viewed the world. Because of her affliction, she was ceremonially unclean. Because of her bleeding, she couldn't touch people. She would make them unclean. So she avoided people. But also, she'd spent all her money, so she was most likely broke. And we can infer, historically, it is reliable to assume that she was unmarried as well. And in this context, an unmarried woman already is living in a lesser world. But also because of her affliction, she's just left completely alone. She's a social outcast. And I just want you guys to imagine living like this, where this is really all that you can see. This is all you can focus on. This is the world that you are forced to live in, is at people's feet. And the feet is the most unwanted, unwashed, untouched, gross part of people. You want to avoid it, especially in this culture, in this context. That's why Peter, when Jesus goes to wash the disciples' feet, was like, bro, I can't let you do that. Come on. That's some of the context here. Is painting the world from her perspective this is not a situation that you want to be living in. So even living like this, set apart in this lesser world, really, she's living with all of these people around her, but yet she's completely alone, suffering alone. All these people, no one to help her. She had a faith that would heal her. She saw Jesus and said, man, I need to reach out to that guy. Now, being a Bible college student, I've been taught to love my commentaries. In the Holman New Testament commentary on Mark, Rodney Cooper says, she probably suffered from physical exhaustion as well, and possibly pain. An even greater source of pain would have been the interruption of daily social activity because of her disease. Anyone coming in contact with her would be made ceremonially unclean. She herself was unclean and would not be allowed to participate in communal feasts and sacrifices. She was just as much an outcast as the demon-possessed man had been. Wow. What a really daunting quote. That statement just gives a whole new context and picture of how she's living and being treated. The demon-possessed man, Legion, was chained up outside of town to some tombs. He was cutting himself with rocks. He was completely outcast. He had no one to help him. He was living far outside of the town. And this statement, she was just as much an outcast as he was. She was living right in the middle of town, yet she was being treated pretty much the same. Nobody was going near her. Everybody was avoiding her. She had to live as if, she was lesser than everybody else when she really needed help. I first read that, and I got a little sad. I really felt for this woman. She was desperate and alone for many years. Now imagine a crowd so dense in the middle of this that nobody has any kind of free space. Everyone's jostling for space, a sea of faces, and she breaks what she should be doing. She can't touch anybody, yet she's pushing through this crowd because she's so desperate. She finally sees a way out of this situation. She sees Jesus. And not only is she, pressing against all these people, which makes them unclean, she reaches towards Jesus, which might make him unclean as well. So keep that in mind as we move on here. But know that God is with you the entire time. During all of our circumstances, our issues are not invisible to him, and we'll see that here. So one of my encouragements as we reach out to the healer is to reach out in faith, to know that there is a God who wants to meet us where we are at, who loves us. But what about with her? What happened to her after she touched Jesus? Moving on here in the passage, and immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that the power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" And his disciples said to him, You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, "Who touched me?" And he looked around to see who had done it, but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." After touching Jesus' cloak, she was healed immediately. This immediate healing emphasizes the power of Jesus and the effectiveness of her faith. Despite her long suffering, her healing occurs in an instant. I can't imagine the joy that she felt. Gundry, in his commentary on Mark, I forgot to include this quote, he says, "At long last, there can be no doubt of her cure. She is healed for good." The Greek verbal form behind healed, Gundry says, indicates permanence. Jesus' power eliminated any possibility of a relapse. Nothing that any physician could do could help this woman, no matter how much money she spent. But the moment she meets Jesus, she's healed. When the healer heals, it's permanent. And when she touched Jesus, Jesus asks, "Who touched me? Who touched my garments?" And this next part always makes me laugh. The disciples go, "Bro, come on. Really? There's so many people touching you. Like a dude literally just stepped on my foot and might have crushed. I might need some healing for that later, okay? Like, what do you mean who touched you?" And Jesus, he's like, "No, somebody touched me deliberately." Because Jesus recognizes someone who touches him sincerely and someone who seeks him casually. You see, the Greek word used here for that thronging word is synflebo. I'm pretty sure I'm saying that right. I asked my Greek professor, so I'll just say it with confidence. Synflebo. And it means to press together, to compress, or to crowd. Mark is using very strong language here to get the point across of just how tight this crowd is and just how important that one lady touching Jesus was. That everyone's pressed so tightly together, the disciples are perplexed. It goes right over their head, as things usually do with the disciples. They oftentimes don't get it because this contact was different. It was motivated by faith. It was sincere. Because Jesus, again, he knows when someone is seeking him casually and when someone is seeking him sincerely. Dr. Paul Brand I'm going to bring up a medical story here, as the medical field is very close to my heart, because it is initially one of the things that drew me to be serious about my faith. Just seeing the way that we are made, the way that we can be healed, really drew me to fall in love with God and know that there is a creator. Dr. Paul Brand, a missionary surgeon, dedicated his life to caring for people with leprosy. You can see him there treating one of his patients, a young boy. His patients lived in hopelessness, thinking there was no help for them, no way to get their lives back. Because just like in Jesus' day, lepers were ostracized from community. They were forced to live outside of towns. We see Jesus going straight into these communities. We also see Dr. Brand. He worked to help many regain their lives. He goes straight into it, and he is working to cure them. Because Dr. Brand understood a truth. He understood that this physical ailment went far beyond the physical. It affected them socially, emotionally. It really wrecked their whole lives. In fact, the physical part might have been one of the least parts of the pain that was included in this ailment. If he had not gone into that community, then their lives, they would not have gotten them back. You see, in the story about the bleeding woman, it was a very similar case. Jesus understood that if he did not call her out, then she might have gone away with a sense of guilt. Oh, I just took advantage of the Messiah, the one that saved me. And see, the reason that she initially hid was because she was most likely expecting a harsh response. Not only did she make many people in the crowd unclean as she was pushing through, she also made Jesus unclean as she touched him. Because many people in the crowd could have perceived it as that. Many people in the crowd could have been angry at her. She might have even expected Jesus to slap her for that. Because when he called out, "Who touched my garments?" her hiding doesn't work. He immediately called her out. She's like, "Oh man, here it comes. Here comes the response." Because Jesus sees her out of all those people as seeking him sincerely. Again, he can distinguish between someone who seeks him casually and someone who seeks him sincerely. So my second encouragement is to reach out sincerely to the healer. We've seen that in times of need and desperation with this woman, that reaching out can lead to our help. In our times of need and desperation, we need to reach out to the healer. We can't stay behind facades or pain or anything that's keeping us from Jesus, truly. He sees us. Our pain and our afflictions are not invisible to God. And he truly cares about us as well, as we've seen in this passage. Little 8-year-old Matt felt unseen when he was choking on that ice cube. The lepers felt totally abandoned before Dr. Brand showed up. I felt a little abandoned in Poland, but I understood. One of the most amazing things to me in this passage is not that she was immediately healed. Is not that the disciples didn't get it. That was almost to be expected. The most amazing thing to me is Jesus' response. This woman is completely abandoned. Likely has no family or friends or community to help her, and she's expecting a harsh response. Jesus turns both of those thoughts on their head. He says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." Wow. As if to say, your identity is no longer found in this 12-year affliction. It is now found in me as a daughter of Christ. You are now a child of God. That is where your identity is. I've healed you. So I encourage you all to reach out to the healer. Truly, it is the best thing for you, and I want you to know that you are met by a God who loves you deeply. You're met by a God who will meet you where you're at, a God that would rather have died than been without you for eternity, and that's exactly what he did. And then he even defeated death. Reach out to the healer and know that you are met by a faithful God.